So I'm Igor Druzhinin, and I work at Citrix on the Citrix hypervisor product, and mainly responsible for some of the low-level maintenance work, like bug fixing, supporting our cloud customers, investigations, all sorts of stuff. But we're also looking at the evolution of the product as well. And so we take some features from upstream, productize them, help upstream to improve the quality of these features. And one of the things that was on our radar for quite a while is the vTPM support. So because Citrix Hypervisor is primarily the VDI platform, we are especially interested in running Windows as a guest. So in Windows for quite a while, there was a push for features like virtualization-based security, like features device guard, credential guard, all of this. And among those was a requirement that was sort of a recommendation previously, that the underlying platform has to basically provide the TPM 2.0 support. And until recently, that was just a recommendation. But because with the new Windows Server 2022 release, we are going to they are going to change these requirements, and the TPM 2.0 support is now absolutely mandatory for any virtualization platform that is expected to be compliant with the SVVP suite. So any our customers that might raise the issue with Microsoft might face the and this is the issue related to Windows Server 2022. They might face problems with Microsoft support because our system is not compliant. So this is basically the question of survival of the product for us. As every release previously we ran the SVVP suites and submitted them to Microsoft. And I know that in the community, there was a push for TPM 2.0 support for quite a while. There is some ancient vTPM manager functionality that I think only provides 1.2 support. I'm not sure how extensive it is actually. But we need 2.0 plus we need the hardware support. So as far as I know, vTPM manager only gives like PV interface. There were attempts to integrate it with QEMU to provide support for HVM domains with the native drivers, but I don't think any of this was actually merged. Yeah, Andrew, you mean in the vTPM manager? Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, now that you're not mid-chat, I'll chime in and talk. Yes, so there's vTPM Manager that exists and was some early work, but it clearly hasn't seen any testing on TPM2. To the original, to Christopher's question, the thing that is important here is for the VM to see TPM. Fixing both that and hardware-rooted TPMs is is frankly too much work. We need to get one working first, and then we can make the other work second. So for now, all that matters is that the VM sees a virtual TPM that we fully manage the state for.
Yeah, so I ideally, so the reason why I decided that digitization might be useful is to gather the feedback from the community to understand where we can also address other concerns that people might have, because people want to have 2.0 support, and obviously introducing this support like on our own into the existing like thing that we have is very complicated and time consuming. So so the suggestion was to like integrate some of the existing TPM emulators, and among the existing ones that among those that provide TPM 2.0 support, IBM TPM 2.0 and SWTPM, also created by IBM. So SWTPM is actually stands out among all of the others. Are mostly like simulators. They do not have a goal to provide a TPM device model or something like this. They just simulate TPM functions. This is not the same. So actually, the choice is quite small. I mean, it's there were more options available for 1.2, but 2.0 is basically the choice is non-existent. We have, and SWTPM is actually much mature product. It's worth noting that we had a push in Citrix. We had a push to integrate TPM emulator previously 4 years ago, but back then there was no 2.0 emulator readily available in the mature state. Now the situation is different. And because of this, we couldn't really push the feature quite far enough. Although there was indication that it might become necessary for credential guard, but I think those are still orthogonal. There is no clear link between them. Yeah. So SWTPM is the emulator of choice because it is mature. It has support from such companies as Red Hat. As far as I know, they use it in their product already in the virtualization platform. And I think there is a fork that Google is using in JCP. So the community support is quite large for this. And what it means is that the SWTPM code is frequently updated with the recent specs, and bugs are readily fixed, although those are quite rare now. Yeah, so I actually have some slides here, so we can have a I don't know how.
If it's a PDF, you should be able to upload the slides, or you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to share my screen.
Igor, you do have presentation privileges, so you should be able to share it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see this?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah. So this is like like sketch of an architecture that is proposed. So you can see here that we're going to have a HVM VM, presumably Windows, and we're going to supply our ACPI UEFI compliant firmware. So UEFI is a prerequisite for TPM 2.0. There is no way to, I mean, there is no supported way of running it in BIOS VMs, so UEFI support is a must. Next, we have QEMU to 12 plus, I think. So any version higher than this should be almost good enough. There are recent changes to make it more like Windows friendly. So if you take like version 4.2 maybe and higher, it should have more things enabled in the TPM emulation area. And you have SWTPM daemon that is running the TPM 2.0 model. And the daemon is connected to QEMU using Unix socket. And QEMU provides TIS or CRB interface to DOM-U. So Windows works well with CRB. And I think this one is the preferential for 2.0 model. Those are documented on the TPM Trusted Computing Group, I think, website. So this link. There is like vast amount of resources there. I mean, the number of specifications that are required to implement the TPM emulator may be more than 20 documents or higher. Yeah, so if for someone interested, it's a treasure trove. Yeah, so next, returning to the architecture. So the QEMU is in libxl and in XAPI model is running in the sandbox. So it is deprivileged, it is chrooted, whatever we could disable, we disabled. So this project was, QEMU deprivileging was originally run by Citrix, and then with the help of our upstream team, it was successfully integrated into libxl. Yeah, so, and there is a SWTPM daemon that I didn't decide about it, but it could be deprivileged as well. There are provisions for doing this. Presumably because it's not as easy to deprivilege QEMU in KVM mode. So, but because there is like you need to go through the QEMU, which is already sandbox, to actually take control of the SWTPM and TPM state. I'm not sure that makes that is really like something necessary, but it could be done. I don't know what's the feedback of the community in this area. Maybe people prefer it some way or another. Yeah, and there is also so SWTPM saves the TPM state in a file currently. In the file system, and this is the only way. It's not very flexible, so to work with like such tool stack as XAPI, which using XAPI database, it would need to be modified probably, or there should be some way of indirection where the file is actually stored somewhere on for example, NVRAM VDI that again XAPI provides for each VM. But there are questions of scalability and how this all going to be integrated. So we are, about the integration of SWTPM and XAPI toolstack, we are currently in a design phase. So SWTPM, as you can see, running for each VM individually, so the same way as QEMU. is running for each VM individually. So we're getting to quite important point here. And there is a hardware TPM in almost every system now. But the thing is that differently from vTPM manager, SWTPM is not designed to be linked to hardware root of trust. Instead, the root of trust is the hypervisor and control domain itself. What does this mean? It means that the PCR registers are not actually extended from the hardware TPM. It means that the platform certificates of the TPM instance are not actually going to the platform to the certificates of hardware TPM that hardware TPM produce. So actually in Citrix we created this is a very different guarantees from vTPM manager. That's why I'm pretty sure that there are people who would like to have both of them present. And that's why I'm saying, so if we are integrating into the libxl, this is going to be like more like a alternative engine or something. So I'd like to know what are the use cases currently that people are thinking vTPM manager might have and that are not going to be addressed by this architecture here. So with SWTPM not being strongly linked to the underlying platform. Does anyone have any opinion on the matter? Okay, check.
Well, you know, eventually, how do I explain? Everyone is operating in a giant vice that's being slowly turned by Microsoft, okay? So the vice has reached a point where you must present a TPM-shaped object to the guest. But clearly it doesn't give you any guarantees about anything really. So if you look at the rest of Azure's architecture for attestation and Microsoft's primary captive audience, which is Office, eventually you're going to get to a point where you want to open an Office doc. The Office doc cannot do, in Azure, it cannot do an attestation to the endpoint, right? A device running Windows, which is not able to pass a complete attestation all the way down to the hardware. So the highest level of security, you know, which would be controlled by the, say, the document owner. So maybe it's a very valuable contract or something you want to sign, would only be available to devices that can handle the full hardware attestation. So it's just a question of when they turn that switch. But you can see it today in some of the secured core marketing material, or the Surface 4 laptop, I think, which is the first secured core device. And it goes all the way, it's not just the TPM, it's the firmware. And within a few years, it's going to be the Pluton root of trust within the CPU itself.
Yeah, I agree this is going this way. There is no doubt in it. Currently, it's not the case. They do not require it. And moreover, their own we actually ran some investigation and the existing vTPM implementations on the market. So we compared how the things are actually integrated into the SWTPM integrated into KVM currently with libvirt orchestration. And we compared it with Hyper-V. So with Hyper-V, there is again no link to real CA in the vTPM instance. So it's and this is the same with VMware as well. And obviously, in both cases, the measurement is not going to hardware as well. So, because people say it does not scale. I mean, we haven't actually tried, and I'm sure there are papers that claim the opposite. But the commercial implementation are operating pretty similarly. And they mostly give the guarantees that SWTPM gives.
Yeah, so it's not, I wouldn't get hung up on hardware. It's the hardware is because the key infrastructure or the vendor certificates, Daniel knows the correct name, but whatever the hierarchy is of OEMs who have the ability to provision physical TPMs, the question is whose key infrastructure, root certificates will be honored by the things that want an attestation. And by the way, just to be clear, there's nothing that says Microsoft has to dictate to the whole universe how we do attestation. Hyperlaunch, open source, there's a lot of other alternatives. So ideally, the open community, right, would have a competing attestation story with fully open FPGA-based roots of trust.
Right. So I think what you're getting at, which is, I've been trying to stay quiet about it. So the issue you run into, which is what all the VM providers, hypervisor providers have done, is that they've all built software TPMs inside the hypervisor and just declared the hypervisor as the root of trust for all of this.
Yes.
The issue you have, which is when you look at the TPM architecture, especially when it comes to attestation, is the idea that every TPM has been provisioned with a certificate that was put there by the manufacturer of the TPM to tell you that this is a real TPM. And so therefore you can have an assurance that all the properties a TPM provides you is there. When you run a TPM in the software and you provision it with your own certificate as the EK, you have no guarantees that TPM really does what it's supposed to do, right? It's not been certified by any organization to be a correct TPM. The best we can have is if it's an open solution, we can do validation to ensure that the right software was in place and all this, but you don't get that hardware-backed certified mechanism that you get with a physical TPM. And I actually disagree with everybody that keeps saying that it's not scalable. It's actually very scalable. That's what, and Andy was pointing at it. That's what the vTPM manager did, is demonstrated, because this problem was the same. The TPM hasn't really changed too much between 1.2 and a 2.0 in terms of some of these things. What the vTPM manager did is gave you a bridge between the hardware to the software that allows you to do what was called deep attestations. So you can have a chain of trust back to the hardware TPM.
Yeah, but there are, and that's nice, and if it just worked, it would be excellent. But it doesn't just work. It doesn't have TPM 2, and frankly, until Hyperlaunch is there and working, you've still got an order of starting up problem if you want DOM0 able to access the TPM.
I would actually say that the biggest problem is that the vTPM capability that's in the tree today is a PVTPM and not a hardware emulated TPM with an MMIO address space mapped into the guest.
Yeah, so there are practical problems with how this infrastructure currently exists. And to put it perfectly bluntly, the requirement to be able to run Windows Server 2022 is a harder requirement than the technically ideal solution.
Right, which is why
the latter can be retrofitted in the future when the other bits are in a better state. But the former is a hard deadline.
Right, and which I understand. That my biggest concern, which is why we're still here, is that a good enough solution. Everybody keeps pushing off because we have a good enough solution to get through. Sorry, let me mute. I guess the Blue Angels are going again today. So yeah, I don't want people for this solution to roll out and everybody be happy that, oh yeah, we got vTPMs now, we're good, and not realize that you're sitting on a house of cards in terms of your security architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we are saying that vTPM manager is good. I mean, it's good, but we need this. We need the same level of support as SWTPM is getting. So we need frequent updates to the recent TPM spec. We need some maintainers. We need a hardware interface, things like this. And frankly, one of the points why vTPM manager is not a very good solution for Citrix hypervisor as a subdomain centric architecture. It could all be reworked, I think, but there are again pros and cons. Difficult to say. I mean, vTPM manager looks like more proof of concept rather than something production ready, while SWTPM is closer to production, although with less guarantees and in security domain.
Amongst other things, vTPM manager as it currently exists is using some decade-old libc and various other libs and has really been bit rotting for most of a decade, which doesn't put it in great stead for actually running it in production, irrespective of anything else going on. So at a minimum, that would need to be ported onto something such as Unicraft or another actually up-to-date unikernel build system.
And so what is the hard deadline for this Windows to be out, to understand more about the context?
So we have tested the preview already, Windows Server 2022. It installs, it works without TPM, but yeah, there is a question of certification. And I asked our Windows team that works with Microsoft some time ago, and they still didn't get the final SVVP. So what we expect is going to happen, as this SVVP suite, there will be HLK tests that are already available in HLK for a long time, and the OEMs are using them to certify their physical platforms. So these tests are going to be migrated, and Red Hat is thinking the same. That's why they actually we're running HLK as well as us, and verifying that their platform actually does correspond to whatever the Hyper-V currently provides. and they get the same like tests failing, like unknown CA, and some spec version things. So, but those failures are common again between the latest Hyper-V implementation and the SWTPM. And we've actually integrated, we created a prototype with SWTPM running on Xen. It is not difficult at all. And we tried to run the HLK tests, and they actually revealed some things that are missing that are present in KVM version and are missing in Xen version. So I'll get back to it a little bit later, but the timeline, I think, is answering your question, is maybe this half a year. So the certification is going to start like very, very soon.
Okay, so I think, my opinion, that makes sense to start with, trying to integrate, I would say, a kind of battle-tested solution that's already used by Red Hat, because, there's a lot of contributors. And then the only question left on the short term, at least, is the cost of this integration within XAPI and all the stuff. So do you plan to, does it require just to modify XAPI, or is there other modification that should be done elsewhere, or that kind of things?
So yes, that's what I'm actually wanted to get back to. So if we are settled on the plan that we are like introducing like SWTPM support into XAPI, and then we think about like alternative upstream integrated as an alternative to vTPM manager implementation for people like those people who want to just have vTPM and be happy, and those who do not care that much about the actual hardware root of trust. So what there is some work that is necessary to be done in QEMU, in OVMF, and HVM loader. So as people mentioned on the on the chat channel already, that the HVM loader needs to provide certain ACPI tables. That is what we've done in our prototype already to make it actually to make Windows actually see the TPM device. But there are more things that need to be done to make it like completely HLK compliant. So and another thing is the PPI support, the physical presence interface, that KVM has and Xen doesn't have. So physical presence interface requires a special region of memory to be like specially designated for storing a TPM command by operating system. And this command is on the next boot is executed by the firmware. So some commands like TPM clear, changing of ownership, things like this, they could be transferred to firmware, and they require the physical presence to be manifested, which currently means that you would need to press a key on the keyboard while the VM is booting. And this is one of the requirements for HLK test to pass. So many of the tests are currently failing because of this on Xen. This would need some changes in OVMF and Xen side of QEMU correspondingly. I think this is the work currently required on the lower level. And of course, there are like things, many things need to be changed in XAPI to actually understand the vTPM device. But somehow the most complicated part is how we manage the TPM state. So it could be similar to how var_stor_d is currently managing the UEFI in VRM. Or we could go through some other way. But we're currently thinking that the var_stor_d approach is probably the most straightforward. And there are, of course, like small changes in the UI, Zen Center, Zen Orchestra.
Yeah, but obviously, if you have all the API method exposed in XAPI, it's not a big problem. But and there's also the funny thing is already existing API in XAPI to make vTPM, but they are not functional. So maybe they won't change a lot. So from a, let's say, user's perspective, to expose that, it shouldn't be too complicated. The thing I have more hard time to understand the overall work and complexity is the things that are very low level, like, as you said, to modify Zen on QEMU side and OVMF stuff to be able to get the ACPI table modify on the HVM. So on that, I have roughly zero idea on how hard it is. But anyway, on our side, on the XAPI Engine Zen Orchestra project, we are will be happy to assist at some point, because from what I can see right now, everything that you describe is based on open source software. So we could be done, at least at some cooperation level. That should be easy to do on GitHub or on Zendevel if it's modified in Zen.
Yeah, so XAPI contributions are welcome. Right now we are planning this. So in the short term, we are going to focus on the foundation stuff, as I said, like QEMU, OVMF changes. And this will be done probably by me. And these are going to be like bug fixes mostly bug fixes to OVMF and friends. So it shouldn't be difficult. I don't see currently any problems with this.
Do you get requirements to run virtualization-based security features of Windows on Zen?
Yes, and we will be continuing with nested virt at the soonest possible opportunity. Don't be under the illusion that isn't a very high priority for us.
Yeah, basically everything is high priority. It's just there are things that will just mean that people would just stop using the product if we don't do this.
Yeah, and not supporting Server 2022 is one of those.
Hey, congratulations on getting this far. I think you were in the meeting at Zen Summit in Nanjing when Lars arranged a meeting about this very topic, which was vTPMs and measurements, and I think where we did some discussions of trench boot to kick off the fact that, hey, at some point in the future, Microsoft's going to require this. So it's cool that it's now, urgent. So it's a deadline. But there's like another several years of other stuff coming down the pipe. So there are multiple. It's good that this train is about to hit us, so we're suddenly working on it. But there's like 3 other trains right behind it. So what we could do now that we've got people's attention is try to remind them of these other trains and get budgeted and planning for them, because they're coming absolutely just as this one was coming in 2018 when we talked about it.
Yeah, the routing in Pluton is probably going to be a requirement in a year or two. It's not a requirement at the moment because there's basically no hardware that has it, but as soon as the hardware becomes easily available, it is going to be a hard requirement.
Yeah, and what I really would like to see is that we start to put some pressure on Microsoft, so we not, because when we get to the point where it's like you got to run 2022 server, it's too late to influence the spec, right? The spec's locked by that point. So if we can get to them earlier, going, hey, we know you're going to come and hit us with this requirement in 3 years. We want to participate in the negotiation of the spec. So basically, all the VBS features, of which Pluton will be one, are fundamentally about whether Microsoft will allow third-party hypervisors to sit underneath them. And it's not in their interest to make it easy, so we kind of have to fight. All the hypervisor vendors, especially the open ones, need to negotiate what we want.
So our cunning plan currently is to sit on the back of Red Hat and as their users of SWTPM.
Okay. I would also just remind everyone of Bromium, which is, in my opinion, at least partly a fork of Zen, is doing this today. So we can piggyback on them, and they have millions of machines running today with a nested hypervisor doing VBS underneath Windows today. HP laptops, basically. So, and I think they're in Cambridge, maybe give them a knock on their door and lobby together. Because I seem to recall there was some shenanigans about getting a certificate, in order to pass their check. So, yeah, there's a lot of small moving parts that you can move this part, in T-3 years, but you cannot move it in T-1 year. So, some of the things that you're going to need, there's only like another 12 months left to negotiate before, for example, like silicon, roadmaps get baked and chips start shipping. Then it's there's no more time. We'll just have to conform to whatever's there. I know this is really impossible to communicate to product managers, but we can try.
Yeah. So this is mostly, I think, everything that I wanted to cover. So also there is one of the problems that comes with like integration of SWTPM and basically any I think any virtual TPM is the problem of into the existing hypervisor is the problem of VM clone and what to do with the vTPM instance, because you might have, for example, BitLocker enabled on your Windows VM and your keys are in vTPM and then you clone it and you have a choice whether to create an identical copy of virtual TPM with all of the keys and crypto data or just refuse the separation for the user. And
so the reality here is that there are two common use cases.
Okay, sorry, can I break in, guys? So our time is up. It sounds like, there's more to talk about. We can talk about it at the pub session or one of the other sessions. So great. Thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.